short and concise. And in order to present this project and also to share with, even with an Italian, of course, even with an Italian, to share the conclusions with the stakeholders in the Spanish market, we're going to have first Paula Conthe, Secretary General for the Treasury and International Finance in the Ministry of Economy. Then we're going to have Nathalie Berger, Director at DG Reform in the European Commission. Then we're going to have Marcel Haag, Director at DG FISMA, European Commission. And then Carmine Di Noia, Director of Financial and Enterprise Affairs at the OECD. And then I would also give you some remarks at the end, and then we will have the Q&A. And as a reward for your patience and all this, we will also have, an aperitif at the end of the session. So with that and no further introduction, I give the floor to Paula to address the audience. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today, participating in the presentation of the OECD Capital Market Review of Spain 2024. Thank you very much for the CNV to inviting me to participate, and as well for putting in place this very important project and the key contribution that it is, and to all the team of the CNMV for the dedication throughout it. Thank you as well to the European Commission for their contribution, and particularly for making the funding of this project possible through the technical support instrument. And last but not least, thank you, of course, to the OECD for their fantastic work, for the extensive mapping, review, and analysis of the capital markets, and for putting it all together so brilliantly in the report. It's a document that we've reviewed with great interest and very carefully from the side of the ministry, and we very much appreciate the exceptional analysis that's included. We've also taken very good note of the recommendations, and we are quite confident that it will undoubtedly contribute to the work that we all have to do together in revitalizing the capital markets, which, as you know, is a key priority at a national level, but of course as well at a European level. No, as we've had a chance to hear this year in Eurogroup statements, European Council conclusions, and more recently as well in President of the Commission speeches. No, in the past year, in the Letta and the Draghi reports, both of them have emphasized the urgency of deepening the capital markets and mobilizing the necessary investment to close the financing gap and to ensure European resilience and competitiveness. And for once in Europe, there's wide consensus on this. There's wide consensus on the need to mobilize large amounts of funding that are required to transform economies into more sustainable and digital economies and to finance that transition, and the need to develop and to deepen those capital markets that could channel the resources from investors to companies and to contribute to achieving our common goals and to contribute towards growth and prosperity. But of course, the question, as always, is how to do this, because we all very much agree on the fact that there's a need to do it, but it's difficult to actually move it forward. And from the Spanish perspective, we've been very intent on moving from words to implementation, and that's actually also what's behind the proposal that you might have heard that was presented to the Eurogroup a few weeks ago, which is the European Competitiveness Lab, which is proposed as a controlled setting, as a sandbox where multi-country initiatives can be tested, where all countries can be invited to participate, but even those that can't are also welcome to follow and to monitor. The Commission is also present, and the idea there is to test different initiatives that can pave the way for future Commission legislative proposals. Because as we've seen as well this year, implementing and approving legislative proposals is often a challenge, and when negotiated at 27 from scratch, the outcome can be quite different to the initial proposal. A lot of work has been done until now, of course, in revitalizing capital markets, but a lot more remains to be done. Allow me to share a number of measures that we have been implemented or are working on implementing, and the areas on which we're mainly focusing on, and which we have been very happy to see are very much aligned with the OECD recommendations, which provides us great confidence that although a lot of work is still ahead, we are definitely moving in the right direction. And I think the measures that we have focus primarily on three key areas, which is enhancing financing for corporations, particularly for SMEs, encouraging greater investment in capital markets, especially from retail investors, and supporting financing for the climate and the digital transitions. No? In the first area of enhancing financing for corporates and SMEs, it's clear that capital markets offer an opportunity to boost and to diversify corporate financing to support business growth, in particular innovative business models. And one of the key priorities has to be to incentivize companies to actually participate in capital markets and gain greater access to finance. At the EU level, there are many initiatives in this area, or that we have worked on or are working on, and let me highlight in particular two. One is the ongoing work, which you have probably all heard of revitalizing the European securitization market. There's a public consultation underway from the Commission, and we're hoping for a proposal in the coming months. And securitization will be key not only to boost market liquidity, but also to free resources from banks that can be provided for financing for SMEs. There's also been significant progress made on the Listing Act package, which has simplified listing requirements and which has also created mechanisms so that innovative companies are more willing to go to the markets through multi-voting sharing structures and other mechanisms that allow them to retain control while they're still finding financing in the capital markets. In Spain, so this is a lot of what he's doing at the European level, but of course being implemented as well here in Spain. We have also introduced measures such as the law on business creation and growth, the startup law, and we're actually also very actively mobilizing funding through ECO, our promotional bank, as well as initiatives such as the European Tech Champions Initiative, which is being very successful in contributing towards creating a more supportive ecosystem for the financing of venture capital at a national level. And of course, progress is being made, but still a lot more remains to be done. As mentioned at the OECD report, we're actually also working on two important initiatives in terms of enhancing competitiveness in multilateral trading facilities, which serve as a gateway often to capital markets. One of them is removing the obligation for companies to transition from an MTF to a regulated market, when they reach a market capitalization of 1 billion euros. So this element is being we're working towards removing it, and we're also working on establishing a takeover regime that is specific to MTFs and which will serve to protect minority shareholders, encourage investor participation, and boost market liquidity. But obviously access to capital markets for SMEs in particular remains a challenge, and it's also worth highlighting in that area important private initiatives such as the BMS pre-market environment and BMS scale-up, which offer essential support to encouraging SMEs to be listed in MTFs. And going forward, we will remain highly committed, as the OECD recommends, to maintaining a continuous dialogue and working together with SMEs, with corporates, and of course with other private and public stakeholders, and particularly the CNMV, to identify and address barriers that are preventing companies from having greater access to capital markets, including any regulatory challenges. And we're very much looking forward to working ahead and surely putting in place probably many of the recommendations in the OECD reports. And the second area of encouraging more investment in capital markets, which is on the other side of the coin, and encouraging companies to access the capital markets, which is the need to mobilize retail investment and to mobilize savings that can actually ensure sufficient funding for those businesses that are actually listed. No? At a European level, and very much in line with OECD recommendations and the CMU debate, now the Savings and Investment Union debate, we are very supportive of the creation of a pan-European savings product, which could be actually a potential initiative to be implemented through the European Competitiveness Lab, and which we hope will provide an attractive investment opportunity for retail investors and thus allow to mobilize these savings and actually introduce them into the productive economy. Furthermore, we're also working on updating the regulatory framework for securities lending by investment funds, which will certainly enhance their profitability and competitiveness and make them more attractive for savers. And finally, financial education, and the OECD here also places a great importance on its crucial role in mobilizing savings. And we share, of course, that message. We work very hard on it as well from together with the CNMV, the Bank of Spain, and the ministry in the implementation of Spain's financial education plan, which aims to improve citizens' financial literacy with special emphasis on vulnerable groups and younger age groups. And the plan is a great success, but of course, results in this area take time, and we are very much committed as well to continue work in that regard. And actually, that's actually one of the one of the nicest and most rewarding parts of our day-to-day for the Treasury team. And finally, capital markets also play a key role in driving the green and digital transitions, challenges that, of course, are defining the era that we live in and the future that is ahead of us and those of our grandchildren. And transforming our production model requires significant investment. Obviously, the Letta and Draghi reports have given many figures on this, but it's key that capital markets have to be able to mobilize resources effectively to be able to finance this transition. In terms of digital transformation, digitalization is reshaping the financial sector, and it is our responsibility as regulators to establish a framework that maximizes its benefits while at the same time mitigating risks to investors and financial stability. And here, innovating technologies such as distributed ledger technologies, or the famous DLTs, hold a great potential for transformation. And this technology is, of course, best known in the field of crypto assets, but DLT can also transform capital markets by enhancing efficiency, transparency, and security. The Financial Sandbox, which was launched in 2020 and where a total of 111 projects have leveraged a wide variety of technologies have been presented, underscores Spain's commitment to fostering this innovation. And some of these projects actually have had direct implications for capital markets, such as market infrastructures based on DLT or the tokenization of financial instruments. And we are currently working on regulation that incorporates lessons learned from these sandbox and which will enable the representation of financial assets using DLT in regulated markets, ensuring that regulatory framework is aligned with the sector's many innovations, which are, of course, always welcome. And as I said, the only challenge there is to find that equilibrium between fostering innovation and protecting, and which is where I know where the public sector is often many times criticized for their slowness in reaction, but we work very hard to try to keep up and with the speed. In terms of sustainable finance, mobilizing green finance for the green transition is, of course, an absolute must. The EU has developed a sustainable finance framework, and companies are in the process of adapting to it. And in this respect, the availability of reliable, comparable, and complete data for investments is crucial for the credibility of the transition. Spain is actually working on finalizing the transposition of the CSRD directive and making it possible for investors to compare the ambition of transition plans and the progress that has been made. To help business adapt and capitalize on the opportunities presented by this framework, another important development that has been actually approved very recently by the Council of Ministers is the Green Paper on Sustainable Finances, which provides special attention to SMEs. Key initiatives that have been included in this Green Paper, or book, as we call it in Spanish, is the establishment of a sustainability sandbox, where regulators, financial entities, and companies can explore new initiatives to adapt to the sustainable finance framework. There's also the creation of an information repository with access to templates and best practices for companies to adapt to the new framework, or the publication of public sector guidelines which will assist companies in designing transition strategies that are tailored to their industries. Other important initiatives also include developing public-private cooperation to expand green financial products, integrating sustainable finance into financial education programs, or developing the Treasury's green bond program, trying to lead as well through example. We will be establishing a Sustainable Finance Council to foster collaboration among stakeholders and to address all these challenges collectively. And as you know, many of these initiatives rely on capital markets and therefore underscore the importance of these for the climate transition. To conclude, it is clear that transforming capital markets is an ambitious long-term goal that can only be achieved through a combination of a wide range of initiatives on which we all have to work together. No one initiative is likely to be the silver bullet, but all of them together can certainly help us come a long way in achieving our common goal. As I've had a chance to briefly outline, Spain is already making important progress, but much work remains ahead, and revitalizing the capital markets is and will continue to be a key priority. And the OECD's report's recommendations will undoubtedly guide us and help us all achieve this common and shared objective. So I would like to finish like I started, thanking the OECD, the European Commission, and the CNMV for making this report possible and for the continuous cooperation and dialogue. Together, I am sure we will build a future where capital markets play a vital role in fostering sustainable growth and resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paula. Very encouraging ideas, and I give the floor now to Nathalie Berger from DG Reform. What do you prefer?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Today's event marks the launch of the OECD Capital Market Review of Spain 2024, which is really a milestone in capital markets for a vibrant and sustainable Spanish economy and the corporate sector project. This is a milestone, this is a crucial milestone in advancing the project's goal, which is to improve access to market-based and green financing for Spanish companies. And it is built on comprehensive surveys, empirical analysis, and input from a very wide range of stakeholders. And we, as the European Commission, and I'm speaking for DG Reform and Marcel from FISMA will say the same, I believe. We are very pleased to have been able to be your partner in this very important reform endeavor. Developing deeper and more integrated capital markets is critical for ensuring diverse and sustainable funding sources for companies, which is, of course, a core objective of the Capital Markets Union. It is a core objective of the Savings and Investments Union initiative. In Spain and across the European Union, advancing capital markets strengthens economies by improving access to financing for businesses, fostering innovation and growth, and offering valuable investment opportunities for individuals and institutions. And this, in turn, should support savings and wealth creation. We need to activate all the savings that have been accumulated during the pandemics and get them onto finance the development and the competitiveness of our economy. And recent reports from member states, industries and stakeholders, and including the Draghi and the Letta reports, consistently highlighted the urgent need to mobilize more private finance and tackle barriers to its efficient allocation through the capital markets. We all know that public funding alone is not sufficient to address the EU's vast investment needs, making private finance indispensable. Let's think back about the Draghi report that is calling for investments of around 800 billion euros a year if we want to really get to our objective of making the European Union competitive on a global basis. But I will stop here on the objectives of Capital Markets Union and Savings and Investment Union, as Marcel from FISMA will provide further insight on this, including on the vision for the future of the Savings and Investment Union. So let's look at the work that we have done in the context of this project. In DG Reform, we do mobilize our technical support union to provide tailored technical support to reforms that support the growth-enhancing developments in the member states across the European Union. There, we really believe that our mission goes beyond addressing the immediate challenges. We really would like to focus on enabling the member states to implement sustainable, long-term reforms that foster the growth and societal well-being. And with the TSI, we have worked a lot over the last years to try and support member states' efforts to complete our Capital Markets Union. We have advanced capital market developments across the European Union since 2017. Following the adoption of the first CMU action plan in 2015, we have allocated a significant part of our resources to this initiative. We have supported a wide range of capital market-related projects across 21 member states, helping them to strengthen their local capital markets. I'm thinking of another one, having Carmine here with us, that we've done in Italy to complete the capital market strategy, where we have worked over a number of years and we have seen that Italy has completely mobilized and activated their capital markets on the basis of the TSI support. The projects that we have supported have addressed various aspects of completing capital markets, including market assessments, improving investment environments, fostering growth opportunities, and supporting markets in transitioning to higher levels of development. And over the last month, we have had the opportunity of supporting Spain and specifically the CNMV in your efforts, and we will really greatly appreciate your engagement, your collaboration, your dedication, all of which have been instrumental in driving the project through. And I would like to thank you for your trust in our instrument that really honors us. And I would like to thank colleagues from the OECD, Carmine and teams, with whom we have always an excellent cooperation, who are our trusted partner in many TSI projects, for your commitment, the very high quality of work and cooperation, and the invaluable support. Now, we all know that the Spanish capital market faces significant challenges, including heavy reliance on bank financing. But I mean, where do we not have that problem of excessive reliance on bank financing? Low retail participation, underdeveloped domestic institutional investor, and a tax system that favors debt over equity, which limits access to diverse funding sources and market dynamism. Same statement, same observation across the board, wherever we go in the Union and we work on the development of capital markets. But the review for which we're gathered today offers a comprehensive and a holistic assessment of Spain's capital markets, examining the current structure, the functionality, and the performance to address these pressing issues and support future reforms. And most importantly, the review presents a range of policy recommendations aimed at removing barriers to capital market development, improving access to market-based financing, and fostering the integration of green and innovative financial instruments, which we badly need in Europe. Specifically, the review highlights 5 recommendations aimed at enhancing Spain's capital market by increasing retail participation. Second, strengthening the pension fund sector for long-term investments. And we have recently worked on pension funds in a separate project in Spain. Third, addressing the tax bias against equity financing. And 4, improving SMEs' access to diverse funding sources through public-private cooperation, all with the goal of fostering a more dynamic and inclusive financial ecosystem. But these recommendations, and that is very important, are not isolated measures. If they were so, they would fail. They need to work together. They're all part of a coordinated strategic effort designed to create a more dynamic and inclusive capital market ecosystem in Spain. And we're therefore confident that the review provides a solid basis for the Spanish authorities to develop a national implementation strategy and reform roadmap, ensuring a clear path towards the successful transformation of Spain's capital market. Now, developing a capital market strategy for Spain is a challenging endeavor. We know it, requiring attention to the specific characteristics of the Spanish market. And this involves balancing the diverse needs of the stakeholders, including the SMEs, which represent 99% of business, but often view themselves as too small for capital market participation, and large corporations, both of which rely mainly on bank financing. Now, the limited role of domestic institutional investors, such as pension funds and insurance companies, further complicates the landscape, leaving Spanish corporations heavily reliant on foreign investment. And these challenges, combined with the economic structure of Spain, which is characterized by the SMEs, which account for a majority of businesses and employment, that does add another level of complexity. Tackling these issues calls for coordinated efforts from the Spanish government, the supervisory authorities, and the market participants all together. Strong political commitment is particularly crucial for this endeavor. It ensures that the stability and the support needed to implement comprehensive reforms, enact favorable policies, and create regulatory frameworks that boost investor confidence and drive market growth. This effort is absolutely worthwhile. The development of robust, efficient, and liquid capital markets yields significant benefits, not only for the national economy, but also for the European Union as a whole. So we all need it. And as mentioned before, together with the OECD, the European Commission, DG Reform will continue to offer our support in this process as part of the ongoing efforts to strengthen Spain's capital market. Once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this event. We're very interested to follow up on what's going to go on, because this report is actually a start. So we are much interested to continue to cooperate with you to look how to get to the final outcomes of this very, very important initiative. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot, Nathalie, and thanks for your support on all this project. Now we'll hear from Marcel Haag from DG FISMA. Marcel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Allow me to use this opportunity to complement my colleague Nathalie's intervention with some thoughts from the perspective of the European Commission on the Savings and Investment Union. Over the past year or so, the political discourse has increasingly focused on the role of capital markets in promoting competitiveness, prosperity, and fairness in Europe and for its citizens and businesses. Also, the changing geopolitical landscape has contributed to a renewed focus on capital markets and their role for strengthening Europe's open strategic autonomy. The point of departure of our analysis is clear. EU citizens hold significant savings for which they deserve a decent return. At the same time, businesses in Europe need substantial additional financing to stay competitive by innovating and mastering a socially fair, green and digital transition. An open and integrated capital market is a prerequisite to bring savings and investment needs together. This is acknowledged by the European Commission, and in her political guidelines presented on 18th of July of this year, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen proposes a European Savings and Investment Union. The Savings and Investment Union will aim at facilitating and encouraging the shift of household savings towards more productive and innovative investment that strengthens Europe's prosperity and sustainable competitiveness. The Savings and Investment Union brings together Capital Markets Union and the completion of the Banking Union. It sets a positive agenda around supporting household wealth creation, effectively growing the assets held by EU citizens, whilst also helping to finance EU innovation as well as the digital and green transition. Arguably, many of the essential building blocks of a successful Savings and Investment Union are already in place through the 2 CMU action plans that Nathalie also mentioned, various actions on banking union, and many milestones that have been reached in our effort to develop a true single market for banking and capital. It is clear, however, that more needs to be done. The new political momentum to act and the new political focus on a Savings and Investment Union is encouraging. Progress on EU capital markets has become a must-have and not a nice-to-have if we want to keep our financial institutions and our capital markets relevant on a global scale. This implies scaling up the investor base and promoting also the participation of retail investors in supporting the real economy via simple retail investment products. We must incentivize savings for retirement through occupational and personal pension schemes, mobilize long-term investments, and reduce remaining frictions in fostering integration and fair competition. Improving financial education remains also a challenge. The Commission President has asked the Commissioner for Financial Services, Maria Luis Albuquerque, to work on a strategy on financial literacy. This work can build on work done in member states, but also on the close cooperation between the Commission and the OECD in this field. The importance of savings and investment union was also echoed in the Draghi report on competitiveness. Financial services and capital markets feature prominently in the report, which highlights their role and potential to support the competitiveness of the EU economy. The report by Mario Draghi offers various recommendations in this field, and a lot of them seek to tackle long-standing issues. The report rightly situates them in the context of the EU's investment and competitiveness challenge. We welcome the push and the ambition for savings and investment union, for the need to mobilize more private capital, improve the scale and effectiveness of our capital markets, and for ensuring that we have the right finance in place to drive the green and digital transition. The Eurogroup, in its inclusive format, and also the European Council in its conclusions, and Paula mentioned this already earlier on, explicitly invite member states to take action on critical areas that range from examining how to grow the investor base, to increasing the provision of risk capital for scale-ups, to addressing issues that might hinder market consolidation and integration, to even assessing ways to make their respective tax systems more supportive of investments in capital markets. While certain initiatives are most effective when taken at the EU level, it is essential that member states also do their part. However, it's crucial that any national measures to develop domestic capital markets do not exacerbate market fragmentation. Instead, they should aim to complement EU action and help to further integrate national markets into a single large and developed EU capital market. While the Commission at the EU level has a key role in fostering financial integration, also all member states must contribute by strengthening and developing existing domestic capital markets, building on best practices, and exploring opportunities for targeted harmonization. We must integrate and develop at the same time. This will allow to acquire the scale necessary to compete globally for the benefit of businesses and citizens in the whole EU. For this, we very much welcome the report prepared by the OECD on the Spanish capital market, and hope Spain will make a constructive use of the recommendations made in the report. So let me conclude by saying this. The Savings and Investment Union must aim to promote strong, stable and integrated European financial markets, and must be based on strong cooperation with and involvement of member states and other stakeholders. Only a joint effort can lead this ambitious project to a success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marcel. I think you are one of the persons in Brussels with a more difficult job in the next few years, because the size of the project is very daunting, but it's very good that we are in safe hands. Finally, Carmine Di Noia, Director for Financial Enterprise Affairs at OECD, and I wouldn't say if it's the father or but one of the fathers of the report. So we are looking forward to listen to you, Carmine.
Yeah, thank you, Rodrigo, Paula left, Nathalie, Marcel, and all of you for being here today. And thank you also for the trust that you have put in the OECD, the Commission, Spanish authorities, but I have to say in particular also European Commission, in particular DG Reform. We have this long-lasting relationship, and on many aspects, and on many aspects also on capital markets, supply, demand. And I have to say that as as Nathalie mentioned, I saw the first capital market review was on Italy. I was on the other side when I was a commissioner of the Italian CONSOB, the Securities Commission. And we have seen how really impactful this has been. This was very carefully prepared by, at the time, the OECD team. I would have never imagined after some years to be on the other side. And then, transformed with a path, recommendations at a different level, like the one today here. In law, actually, we have a new capital market law following for many articles, the review of the OECD, which was then transformed into a document by the Treasury, but then some of them were directly implemented by CONSOB. So is a path, but then as everything in life, reward is proportional to the effort. And but again, thank you, Nathalie, because really the work that we're doing, and we see really the impact. So we're very happy for that. So the review is here. You have seen. I will present basically the main finding and policy recommendation of our report. So which is actually the product of over 1 year of dedicated work in collaboration, also with the Commission, with all the people here, and it has been very fruitful. But before I start, also this was already mentioned. I want to thank, I would say, all of you, but all this work is I think is important because it's also coming from the dialogue, the interaction with also all forces, I would say stakeholders of the markets or the stock exchange and industry associations and other representatives of the public and private sectors who really shared their expertise. And we discussed, a lot on obviously on the Spanish capital market. And so a great thank you also as well, all the companies in particular, the issuers that also were, and also companies in general that were part of the survey we developed specifically for this project. And again, as we have done also in other projects, because we really want to be evidence-based. And I think this is when you have numbers backing recommendations, much better than fluffy things. And so the insights also that we got from the review into the challenges and opportunities that faced by companies in accessing finance were really very valuable for our analysis. Now, so I'll start with an overview of the current context before moving on to our recommendations. Now, in the public equity markets, Spain, I would say that many features are common. Also, Nathalie was mentioning to many European EU27 markets, where also we have been working a lot. So there has been a structural decrease in Spain of the number of listed companies in the last 2 decades. And so it's shown on the left here, basically the main segment of the BME has been almost, seen almost twice as many delistings as new listings since 2000. Again, not an unusual feature in also having a look. And again, I see many common features, taking my old hat of what was the Italian situation. The exception, the segment for smaller growth companies introduced in 2009 has been much more dynamic than the main market, which is encouraging, and again, common feature also of other countries. But as shown also on the right, the number of listed companies still remains limited when compared to other European growth markets. Now, again, nothing, as you see, the numbers broadly are not so different in many countries, as also Nathalie was saying. The use, of corporate bond markets is also limited, especially among non-financial companies. And these firms instead, depend primarily on bank loans, which account for, on average, 90% of their debt financing, a high share here, even in a heavily bank-dependent EU context. We know the situation is completely different in the US, who are often taken as a comparison of it. But now, aside from limiting companies' financing options, these can have broader also macroeconomic implications, because in times of crisis, this can be procyclical. Bank lending tends to contract, so further slowing down economic activity, whereas market-based financing typically can offer more flexibility. But this is Econ 101. Now, but it's not only, let's say, the companies seeking financing, so the demand that are, they are crucial for dynamic capital markets, but a market need also supply. Okay, like all markets. Supply of capital, so meaning a large and diversified investor base is really equally important. And it was already mentioned, institutional investors, namely, pension funds, insurance companies, and investment funds, they play a particular vital role. And I have to say also these last reports, Letta, Draghi, European institutions like to assign reports to former Italian prime ministers, but but also this was for Noia report, but basically, the role of pension funds and insurance is really critical, as if we have, discovered. This is really very important. And this is reflected in the OECD survey of Spanish companies, where actually 86% of listed companies really cited increased institutional investors' attention as actually one of the important factors for remaining listed, okay? And now the current, ownership structure of the Spanish equity market actually is characterized by a relatively low level of institutional investors' participation, especially then, is low in general and is even lower when it comes to domestic institutional investors. Then, okay, there are many reasons. And as shown on the left, so at the end of 2023, institutional investors held 26% of Spanish public equity, but only 1.2% of these was held by domestic institutional investors, compared actually to the EU aggregate of 6.1%. Now, as you can see then on the right, this trend is more or less the same across the different kind of institutional investors and of the financial instruments. So the limited size and capital market activity of these investors severely restricts the growth capacity of the Spanish markets. Now, the pension fund sector here merits particular attention. Now, capital market participation by pension funds serves, two important purposes. And actually, I'm coming yesterday. We had still on at the OECD, also our group of pension fund supervisor, insurance, and experts on that. But now, capital market participation of pension funds is really very important because it serves, again, two purposes. So on the one side, it can support the sustainability, of pension systems, ensuring so the retirees and the prospective retirees have then sufficient, when they retire, sufficient income. At the same time, while simultaneously, providing a crucial source of capital, in broad sense, bond and equity, for corporations. Now, their long-term investment horizon make them obviously more, suited rather than more, let's say, other short-term investors, asset managers, and the others, to projects that are otherwise, difficult to finance. But they can do only, if really, then they're big. So if back pensions are big enough. Now, Spanish pensions entitlements, okay, are the highest in the EU, okay, at over 500% of GDP. But actually, less than 1% of these corresponds to funded entitlements. And in particular, the aggregate size of the occupational pension system is very limited, amounting to no more than 2.5% of GDP. And also, as you can see on the left, neither total assets nor the number of participants has seen basically meaningful growth in over the last 15 years. And individual pension funds on the right have expanded more, but much of these expansion occurred in the 90s. And actually, recent regulatory changes may further constrain the future funds, availability for these plans. Now, mobilizing, it was also mentioned, mobilizing household, savings into capital markets serves the important purpose of providing households with a way, on the one side, a way to partake in corporate wealth creation. And honestly, I really think that this is a question of financial democracy, okay? And not restricting, the ability of citizens, maybe also because authorities or regulators other they think that is very risky. But then in this way, only limiting the possibility of investing only to a limited number of people. And we have seen that in the last years, by all measures, inequality has increased, a lot. But also, on the other side, again, as we said, it facilitates, corporate access to finance, especially for smaller companies. Now, because basically Spanish household assets are predominantly concentrated in real estate, again, this is also happening in other EU countries. So, with real estate assets actually accounting for 3 times as much as financial wealth, then these aspects of the supply demand are both weaker than they could be. And household financial assets are lower, as you see on the left, than in the euro area. But in addition, also as you see on the right, nearly 2/5 of households' financial assets are basically allocated in a conservative way to currency and deposits rather than to capital market instruments. And this is, again, nothing particularly different than in other countries, and also mentioned in the reports. And now, as a result, existing household financial wealth will not grow much over time if it is currency and deposits. Actually, we have seen even real negative rates if you also consider even cost. So to address this, it is essential to incentivize retail participation, direct and indirect retail participation in capital markets, obviously, in a proportionate way, okay, through appropriate instruments, okay, according to the different, also kind of investors. And I always use this quote of Warren Buffett, which it's very important to convince people that he is always saying, okay, he can afford, but that is not important. I mean, you shouldn't, save what's left, after spending, but you should spend what's left after saving. So saving is important. It's important for your future, for the future, of kids. So, but this is a question, and this so leads me also to financial literacy, and having the right instrument for people to save is a necessary but not sufficient condition to have really successful capital markets. And without a clear understanding of how these instruments work and the benefits they offer, their impact will remain limited. And we work a lot on these issues, also vertically with many countries. And thanks again, Nathalie, because with DG Reform we have done a lot in many countries. And we work also a lot, as you probably know, internationally. And as you know, the PISA test of the OECD are broad, and there is the subset of PISA financial literacy. Actually, Spain has been, like with Italy, US, and Poland, one of the 4 countries which has basically performed all the 4 editions up till now of the PISA financial literacy test. And I remember when we presented, actually there was a lot of also discussion here, but I see also on the press it's continuing. And in actually the last edition of PISA we presented some months ago with Secretary General of the OECD, and with 2022 data. It takes time to elaborate all this data because they're all over the world, and it's good because this is a cohort the same, are kids of 15 years old, okay, all over the world. So it's important because you can compare, it's not pears and apples. And nearly basically 1/5 of the Spanish students, so of the 15-year-old Spanish students, performed poorly, indicating a very limited understanding of key financial concepts. By the way, remember that these guys, and this is all over the world, we think sometimes also, I have to say, we're improving our thought at the OECD. They are not they're already then, so they have poor maybe financial knowledge, but they're already using, the apps, they are buying, they have credit cards. So it's already there. So this is an important issue. And given they represent the younger population, represents the financial future of the country, of your country, and will soon be making, decisions that affect not only their well-being, but also that of the society as a whole. So it's essential to continue implementing targeted initiatives aimed at improving youth financial literacy. I'm happy also, Marcel, of what you were saying. I had a short interaction also with the new commissioner, and this is a work that also we have been doing with the reforming countries and interacting a lot also with DG FISMA. We presented also together, you remember, Marcel, we prepared this financial competence framework for youth and children, and then for adults. So how really, because then we have to go granular. What really you have to teach to kids, and they are different. 5 years old is different from 18 years old. And how, and then who's teaching the teachers, another big issue. And so this is really very important. I conclude because otherwise, as Rodrigo mentioned, and also I have sometimes some conferences where Marcel has to enforce because Italians speaks a lot. That's a snapshot of, a present of the current capital market landscape and so the various challenges faced by both companies and investors. Now, drawing on these findings, and again, so evidence-based, so it's not that we throw recommendation, without analysis, which is not so common around the world. I will now move to some recommendations. It's important to keep in mind that these recommendations, and as Nathalie Berger mentioned, they are designed to work, together. So this is not a silver bullet, that there is not that we're working, just when you need one or the other. So in a coherent framework, implementing them so otherwise in a piecemeal fashion would significantly reduce the impact. Now, there is a total of 32 policy recommendations within 6 different areas in the report. And so, the time and also effort required to implement them, and also the entities that should do primarily, can vary. I will highlight here just some of the key recommendations within each area, but if you have the report, on page 19, they're all summarized. Now, the first policy area refers to promoting conditions for stock market listing and trading. There are many issues. A key recommendation is to introduce a tax allowance for corporate equity to address, a structural issue that is the current, tax bias favoring debt. Obviously, equity financing is truly important and essential for high-risk, long-term, and productivity-enhancing projects, especially then in the twin transition, digital and environmental. So, by leveling the playing field, so on this is important along the lines of the DEBRA proposal, which also have been the EU proposal that has been. So these can encourage, Spain can encourage more equity financing by company. Second, among the many recommendations is to finalize the process to allow also collective investment schemes to engage in securities lending and consider extending this to other vehicles such as pension funds. You may think that this is very limited and technical, but this is really very important because not only give these vehicles, more portfolio management tools, but actually improve the liquidity, other things being equal, can improve the liquidity in the Spanish equity market. And by the way, in terms of BME is also important to also accelerate, the update of all the operational, systems of BME to align it with that of SIX, but also of international exchanges. This is an important issue. The second policy area is related to the conditions for SMEs to use capital markets. Here we recommend, among many things, establishing also a public-private cooperation to promote market-based financing for SMEs, raising awareness about the benefits of accessing capital markets among SMEs, I would say among S in particular, especially, again, it's not particularly different the situation here than in other countries. and family-owned, with the tradition. This is really very important, so this is very critical. And by organizing maybe educational initiatives and providing information on opportunities, this partnership actually would help also create a more vibrant ecosystem also for BME. I've seen, so we talk often about, financial education. I think we need company education. So induction programs, we have done something similar. Again, I'm biased a bit in Italy with the elite program. So really teaching, I would say, companies, but it's not talking about listing. No, this is there's a path. And by the way, otherwise you think that listing is an end in itself, and this would be really adverse selection. But really teaching how really also to ask for a loan, but to think about the structural structures, basic governance issues. So this is very important. How really to present accounts, be interesting for maybe also the research. We also recommend, and so this is linked to supporting research providers such as independent research firms and industry analysts, also physical persons, in delivering analysis of SMEs. Whether by data provision from public authorities, subsidies, or other means. And the purpose of this is obviously to increase liquidity, in particular for smaller companies. The third area refers to increasing the role of institutional investors, given the data we've shown, that, again, are undersized for sure in Spain. A key part will be to continue, they're already there, and Paula mentioned at the beginning, many of these things are already in place and are already moving. Continue efforts to expand the occupational pension fund sector and to encourage these funds to engage more in corporate capital markets. And we also recommend restricting unconditional early withdrawals from pension funds. This policy obviously undermines the nature of a pension fund. It's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction in terms, okay? It's a pension fund is long-term, but then if it can be treated like a normal, investment fund, it doesn't work. So specifically, I think we think that the option of unconditional early withdrawals should be removed for future contributions, but the rights, obviously, of contributions made under the current framework should be protected. This would ensure that pension accounts remain focused on retirement savings rather than short-term liquidity needs. In addition, when it comes to private pension funds, we think that the limits on contribution amounts actually should be decoupled from limits on tax-deductible amounts. These two limits currently are tied, as you know, meaning that contributions are really limited then to the tax-deductible amounts. So decoupling them would allow for a significant increase in or complete removal of restrictions or contributions, so helping increasing the size of the third pillar pension system while maintaining limited fiscal deductibility, again, which is already like this also in other countries. The fourth policy area, and I'm about to conclude, is to promote household savings and capital market participation. Now here, one of the key recommendations to create a dedicated individual investment saving account, and we have examples successful from other European countries where then we see how also the exchange is developing. So these also would offer savers the flexibility on deciding their asset allocation, benefiting from simplified capital gain taxation, and simplicity can have a very important role, especially when you deal with, taxes, and so could potentially then also include other kind of fiscal incentives. It's also important to implement measures to improve financial education for young people, and these initiatives must continuously evaluated and compared internationally, and so which can be achieved also by continuing, but I guess I hope Spain will still be there in the next edition of the future PISA assessment. The fifth policy area covers recommendations to incentivize the use of debt securities as a complement to bank financing. This is particularly important for smaller companies, which are the most bank dependent, and one of our recommendations is therefore to consider introducing a dedicated framework, maybe drawing also on other countries' experience for smaller issuers, like the mini bond framework in Italy with less stringent issuance requirement. It would also be helpful to implement measures to support the smaller companies in obtaining a credit scoring, a credit rating in some ways. There are different ways of doing so. Subsidies is one avenue, but not the only one. And actually having maybe also another option, as we see in some countries, in particular in France, with a direct role, for example, of the Banque de France on some type of credit scores. The final area is to optimize the use of sustainable financing instruments, and this was also mentioned at the beginning. So a market segment actually which in Spain is already relatively strong, and especially when it comes to green loans. And I have to say Europe also, with respect, we have, some of you may know, we have issued our global debt report. I have to say with a focus on sustainable bonds, and the EU is much more advanced than others. Now, the recommendation here is to promote initiatives targeted at non-financial companies, to inform them about different sustainable financing instruments, and to provide practical guidance on issuance for those who are interested. Here, market participants should also ensure that these contracts, these issuance are also designed carefully and in a way that ensures really their efficiency. That is to say that they provide new funding for sustainability projects, which not necessarily happens today with a lot of marketed, green bonds and sustainable bonds that do not finance anything new. And so those are, a few of our recommendations. We're happy to discuss also with you later, and then also in Q&A and afterwards. So before I finish, I'd like to stress that Spanish market so has a great potential. And we've seen during our visits with the team, there is a lot of domestic expertise and a strong institutional framework. So to realize that potential, efforts now need to focus on growing the capital base and connecting it to the real economy through capital markets. Our reports provide a roadmap for doing so. We know from our previous capital market reviews that this publication can act, again, as a catalyst for policy reform, and we look really forward to following development in Spain. Now, I once told, and I conclude Financial Times, that now capital markets have become like a Champions League, so basically highly competitive and dominated by a small number of elite teams. Now, having studied, and as an Italian, having studied, the Spanish capital markets for nearly 2 years with all the team, I see no reason why Spain, couldn't become as dominant and actually as it is in the actual Champions League. So thank you very much, and happy to comment further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmine, and it's really encouraging to have the prospect of the competitiveness in the football sector as a benchmark. Well, as I was saying at the start, I really want to thank everybody for attending this event. This is an important occasion for us at CNMV because it marks the delivery of a project that was originated last year in order to have a thought on how to revamp Spanish capital market, being one of the already main top 4 markets in the European Union, of which we are very conscious. It is a project in which the management team of the CNMV, including myself and the Vice Chair, Monse Martinez, we were involved very closely from the start. And the fact of this being the last public event in which I will intervene as chair of CNMV makes it a very special occasion for me personally also. I would like to start, of course, by thanking everybody that has been thanked before, so I will try to be short. Of course, in the first place, the OECD team for the fantastic job they've done gathering data and feedback and expertise and ideas to assess strengths and weaknesses of the Spanish market. Of course, that is Carmine, but there is a very talented team behind. Serdar could not be here with us, but Alejandra is here, Carl also, and I want to thank them all. Of course, the European Commission, especially DG Reform, but of course also DG FISMA, but for the support on the financing of this project from the start, and the staff at CNMV that has been involved, coordinated by Antonio, on this project. But very importantly, and as Carmine was saying, without the participation of associations, companies, institutions, stakeholders, that many of you, I recognize you sitting in the audience today, without that input, this would have not been possible, because it is ultimately a diagnostic that is based on evidence, but also experience and thoughts from Spanish stakeholders. So thank you very much also to all the companies that answered to the very detailed questionnaire that was sent around. Now, the report, needless to say, is the result of an independent and very professional assessment conducted by the OECD team. It is not the report of the CNMV, it's not the report of the Spanish government or particular stakeholders, not even the European Commission. It is, of course, a report that some recommendations will be, more palatable or attractive than others for some of the stakeholders here, even for us, but it has not been dictated by anyone. It is the product of a team of international experts that have done this in an honest and independent fashion, and very importantly, with an enormous wealth of data. Carmine showed a few slides before, but I encourage you to take a look at the report, because it's really, packed with hard evidence that supports the conclusions. And these evidence-based analysis, in terms of political polarization in which everything turns into a fight, has tremendous value, because those conclusions can be defended from a purely technical point, evidence-based point, under the motto of the OECD, which is, better policies for better lives. So that's why I think it is so important as a tool for this plan to improve the Spanish capital markets, and that's why I also hope that it can guide the action of Spanish authorities in the coming years and the stakeholders. I will not go, of course, into the content of the report. Nathalie and Carmine especially have alluded to that and have described it, but let me instead share with you some thoughts on how we see this issue from the CNMV and how we see capital markets, Spanish capital markets. It's been said before, but I would nevertheless say it again, the depth, the efficiency and the vibrancy of capital markets is absolutely key for the prospects of our economies and, of course, the Spanish economy. Saving and investing, taking risks, obtaining rewards from those investments is absolutely essential to finance innovation, which is something that we are short of in Europe, and to finance projects by companies and public administrations. And this is all even more important in a period of decarbonization and investments, heavy investments in digital and also defense, why not? So you know that this year Acemoglu, Johnson and Robinson got the Nobel Prize in economics for, among other things, establishing that institutional strength is the divisive line between economies and societies that prosper and economies and societies that fail. Of course, from the perspective of an independent regulator, this is pretty evident. I'm not saying that they don't deserve the Nobel Prize for this, but I would add two other ingredients for the recipe of prosperity and of economies and societies beyond this strength of institutions. There is no rich country without a high education level, and there is no rich country without a high capital intensity. And precisely capital is what markets, finance. The financing of innovation, of decarbonization, as I said, of many projects that banks cannot finance or governments cannot back. So we need to ensure that there is the right environment, also regulatory environment, for the development of capital markets. These markets do not generate spontaneously. They need a proper regulatory framework to flourish. And therefore, if we treat or mistreat capital markets as just a matter of rich individuals or greedy investors, we would be literally, digging the grave of our economies with all the implications that has in terms of unemployment, production, and lower resources. That's why we have tried in CNMV to combine our number one priority, which is the protection of investors, with measures that, without putting at risk that primary goal, could facilitate the development of capital markets in Spain, the financing of our companies. Because, make no mistake, there is only one regulator in Spain tasked with protection of investors since 1988, and that is the CNMV, and that is our number one priority. And of course, protection of investors is much, much more than, specific parts of the equation. Is much more than handling complaints. The same as, national security is much more than road traffic police. So there are many interesting discussions today in the regulatory environment in Spain, in Europe, worldwide. Sometimes they are posed in binary terms, which means that we are facing, competitiveness of our economies versus protection of investors, or sometimes we get discussions on market-based finance versus financial stability risks, or single supervision versus national supervisors, or better risk monitoring versus reduction of burden on compliance. But I think we do not need to choose between those extremes. There's no need to choose between absolutes, because I think we can do better by using better data, better analysis, the best of our experience and imagination when we face complex problems like the one we're talking about today. Financial stability can be preserved even when non-bank finance grows. Burden can be reduced even when we devise and implement new monitoring tools to, improve the detection of systemic risk. And we can have more unified supervision in a combination of central and national supervision. So my point is that good policy making is not binary. After having dedicated 20 years of my life to policy making in financial markets, I think this is more an art than a science, but it's an art about combining objectives, knowing what is really important, and adapting to the circumstances, because markets and the economy change pretty quickly. We can take the bond and the equity primary market as an example. It has been mentioned by Carmine a few moments ago. We have promoted from the CNMV several reforms in the last years, not only in the last 4, dealing with lower fees, with support for the changes in the Listing Act that we embraced very, I think, courageously. Reforms on the book entry procedures for issuance, or changes in the verification of admission of fixed income and bonds. And I think that none of those reforms have put protection of investors at risk. They've done in a manner that combined those two objectives. And that's why I would like to announce today that the CNMV will be considering in the short term new ways of first admissions of equity to trading. We have had basically the same IPO process since the 90s, but this is no longer the market of the 90s. It has changed a lot, and we need some reinvigorating shot on the way that IPO processes are conducted. So we will be therefore implementing alternative processes that can be available along the traditional one for IPOs. And in the coming months, together with BME, as the operator of one of the Spanish equity regulated market in Spain, we will allow the approval of prospectuses and the admission to listing by large companies in the Spanish regulated exchange without a prior distribution of shares to the public. That way, the issuer will have the prospectus verified by CNMV the same manner as any other prospectus, with the same stringency and level of oversight, then have the shares admitted to the regulated market in a special segment, start compliance with rules and regulations, disclosure, etc., and then address the distribution of shares in the coming weeks or months after that listing. That could be done through a public offer or through an accelerated book building, and this could add agility to the process. Of course, while the company does not have enough free float, it would be, as I said, placed in a specific segment, and of course would not be open to retail investors until they get the 10% free float that the Listing Act has enshrined. Nothing of this, of what I just described, is enshrined in regulation. This is not a legal change. It's exploring an alternative practice to try to think, to make things easier for those companies that might fit into this process. So we don't need to change a single rule of the CNMV to do that. But with this alternative method, we want to incorporate this innovation to allow the users, the issuers, their investor, their advisors, and of course the investors, to determine which way is better for their interest in each case. Of course, technology is, it's been said before, disrupting everything we know in financial markets. CNMV has embarked in an ambitious digital transformation plan that will require heavy investments in the coming years. And we are concluding now the largest recruitment process of our history in terms of, enlarging our human resources. And this is probably the biggest challenge that we face in the coming years, but I think that we have laid the foundations to face that with enough confidence. Whether we at CNMV or at scale we can contribute to this process, I think we can. There are a number of recommendations addressed to us, but of course we have tried to introduce all these changes, all these reforms, including the one that I'm announcing today, with an almost religious respect for the law, but also being truly independent from government, but also from stakeholders and any other industry body. So what I'm trying to say is that we have tried to introduce those reforms in a manner, going back to Thomoglu and Robinson, that strengthens the robustness of our institutional setting, our institutional framework, putting investors first and being open-minded in terms of innovation and progress. Whether we have succeeded or failed, we will need to work. The jury is still out, and it's for others to assess, market participants, public opinion, but I'm truly optimistic with regards to the possibilities of further developing the financing of our economies. This report is an excellent roadmap of what to do, and I fully agree with Nathalie's point that it is not just isolated measures, it is an all-encompassing proposal, and is an excellent example of how with good data, evidence-based policies, stakeholder participation, constructive partners, but also openness in how we address these matters, everything is possible if we address these challenges together. Thank you very much. We are going to start a Q&A session. Do you hear me? Yeah. We're going to start a Q&A session. So Alberto Estevez, the Head of Communications of CNMV, will moderate the Q&A session. And of course, you're all invited and allowed, of course, to pose questions. I would ask, if anything, that if we address the questions on the topic of the report, which is the topic of today, we do that in English, or otherwise we will translate so that we can have a dialogue also with the colleagues from the OECD on that aspect. Alberto?
Thank you. I will try my best to moderate all of you. So please, let's start with a question about the OECD report. Just wait for the microphone and identify yourself, if you don't mind, before asking the question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's actually not so much a question, but an observation and a commentary. I'm Juan Flames. I'm the new CEO of VME. And well, first of all, thank you to the CNMV. Rodrigo, thank you to the Ministry of Economy and the Commission for this great initiative. Thank you, Carmine, for the presentation and the rest of the OCDE. From a BME perspective, we fully agree and we fully endorse the diagnosis. Strengthening capital markets, it's an absolute necessity, not only to strengthen and continue to grow the Spanish economy, but also to deal with some of the challenges that we have on a pan-European level, whether that's a green or digital transition. We fully agree with the measures you've outlined. I don't want to pick a single one because that will make the others less interesting, but we said about SMEs, about financial education, about retail, pan-European saving product, getting institutional investors, long-end institutional investors to participate. It's absolutely critical. And from a BME perspective, as well as the representative of SIX in Spain, you count with our full support. We look forward to working with all the stakeholders in the government here locally and in Europe to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you for yes. No, thank you for the comment. Obviously, we have been, again, as in other experiences, work with I would say all the ecosystem and the exchange, okay, and different exchanges, but then the regular market is an essential. I'm coming again. Also, I'm biased, but an essential, I would say, essential facility. Someone would say is very, very important. And then, obviously, other things being equal, having also companies on the market, which, by the way, may mean also starting with bond. And so in the, let's say, in the traditional funding escalator, maybe we have put not so much, attention on the bond market, but also bond. I always say, my name is Bond. No, I like bond because I like bond for companies. We have seen a lot of, bonds going on the market in the last years. Also, I would say other things being equal with respect to the past, also I would say more risky, But this is, this is okay, meaning that also new companies could have access to the market. And then this has been also a signaling effect. Many of them then followed, going with the equity. And there is, transparency. And also this is also an interesting asset class. But so I think this is the evolution, of the market. Again, not an end in itself. By the way, let me remind, because Rodrigo is here, we have, OECD is a standard setter. Rodrigo Buenaventura has been, for the last years, the deputy chair of the OECD Corporate Governance Committee. We have these standards, which is not only the corporate governance of companies, and one of the novelty is exactly, very strangely, talking about bondholders, which in the traditional, corporate governance, approach you do not have, but actually is also the governance of institutions. Article 1, so having an appropriate framework where the exchange rules, listing rules, self-regulation, bylaws, having independent and adequate, also resources for regulators, is all together makes then capital markets functioning well. But this is again in the interest not of the exchange, in the interest of the whole ecosystem, and in the end of citizens and taxpayers.
I would add to that going to the bonds part, because I think Carmine is right. We are all sometimes facing too much or focusing too much on the listing of stocks. But there is a feature that was very clear in the slides, which is the Spanish investor is kind of conservative. The weight of fixed income over equity is higher than the average of the EU. But within that, let's say, bucket of fixed income, public debt dominates vastly. But so there is a space, I think, for the development of larger corporate bond markets in Spain, and BME has been innovating with the MARF market, for instance. So that is a feature, because you cannot change the preferences of investors overnight, and it's not a matter of feeding them with equity if they don't want it. But there is a space for development of bond markets, which I think is important in Spain.
If I may, 1 second, Rodrigo. Obviously, again, I'm biased by my origin, country of origin. So bonds are bonds issued by large, companies. They may be more liquid, and also they may be also accessible also to retails. We have, and luckily we have competition also in the European Union. We have some areas, some exchanges, some regulators that have been, I would say, specialized also, maybe in having, I would not simplified approach, but a quick approach, and market timing, especially for a bond issuance, is there. And then you have also bond, and this country also is a country of a lot of SMEs and a lot of S. And now, issuing this mini bond, again, we have the Italian experience, is quite interesting. You issue 1 million, 2 million, 500,000. This is not a bond, it's a bank loan. But it's incredible. The empirical evidence shows that this has an incredible signaling effect, where actually then companies may go back even to the traditional, bank funding. Maybe they were rational because they were maybe startup or young, or they go back at a better, interest. But also this can be, I would say, in many cases we have seen that the next step have been maybe on the equity, maybe on the growth market, being the target, I don't know, SPACs. So it's really very important. Bond market is really very important, and also of demand and supply also for investors.
Let me just add the media representative where they are just free to ask any question about the OCDE report. So please, over there. Okay. another issue. Any other question?
We were clear.
Thank you very much. My name is Elisa Ricón. I'm DG at Inverco, which is the Spanish Association of Investment Fund and Pension Funds. So first of all, thank you very much for this initiative. I cannot set the right order to this to say thanks. So I will say thanks to all the institutions involved, which are a lot. And there is a big number of recommendations. I think I've amounted 32 recommendations, and we mostly share them. But my question is on procedure. My question is, once this report has been published, is there any way to measure or to evaluate the progress or the grade of implementation in the future, or the mandate ends here? Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have seen also these. I would say it depends. Like on corporate governance, we would say it depends. It depends because first of all, this is a set of recommendations that actually, as you see also in the table, is indicated, I would say, if it's short term, medium term, long term, but also is indicated who is, in a sense, in charge of applying the recommendations. Some of them would lead to change in the law, okay, some in maybe in some decrease, so administrative decrease, some in rules or practices, rules of the regulator. Some issues are obviously some recommendations are directly to BME, and welcome to the new CEO, and so it is a different set. And I have to say also in the let's say the empirical evidence of what happened, Italy was the first, but then we in the EU we had also outside the EU. Next week we will present for Philippines, but in the EU we had, thanks again to DG Reform, Portugal, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria. So many. It depends. I tell you, in some cases, first of all, there is a strategy, but then now Paula left, that is at the level of the country, in a sense, to implement, to set a path for implementing. Again, if they, this is, as Rodrigo was saying, this is our evaluation, okay? Then it's up to a government, to the authorities to agree, disagree, like or dislike to the market. This set of recommendation is not, I would say, binding. Typically, what we have seen that there is a strategy. This may lead. Again, I tell you, maybe my experience, I would say officially, because I was then Council Commissioner when also we started to implement in Italy our capital market reviews. I have to say we presented, unfortunately I remember very well, not only for because I think it was a very good work, because unfortunately this was presented 2 weeks before COVID. This was the big presentation in Italy, and then everything changed dramatically in February 2020. And basically what we have done there, some of them, for example, even in these last weeks, I guess, Rodrigo, for example, Consob in the last months issued new, simplified actually exactly the rules within the European, obviously, union, framework on prospectus, others, but to simplify, for example, and trying to streamline the process, the language, and so on. But some of them actually, the exchange also did a lot. Some of them led to change into law. So what happened is that basically the Treasury, the Italian Treasury, issued a sort of took the report, issued a green paper, basically a consultation document transforming. These are policy recommendations. We are not telling you the amendment 42 to Article 30. This is a policy paper, okay? Issued this paper, and then after some time they drafted a bill, so a draft bill, which then was presented by the government to the parliament, obviously with a discussion, democratic discussion, changes, addiction, and things, and then this was transformed into actually a law that last year actually the bill became law. I remember. I tell you that then I was called in the last but one hearing before the finance minister, as in the new role as OECD director, because this has started from the OECD recommendation, and so they have been some of them have been put into practice. Again, these are policy recommendations, and again there are also many others. So I would say there is another our part is not ending today, because then again the strategy we will keep on cooperation, and will be interaction, and also I think also from the DG reform side there is also always an important follow-up. But Rodrigo, please.
I would just add to that without prejudice to any mechanisms that the European Commission might apply in the future to evaluation of reform projects that might come up. From the Spanish perspective, I would say this report is public. The 32 recommendations are there. Anyone can observe at any moment in time, in 6 months or in 6 years, whether they have been implemented or not. So that is open for society, and that is an important element of accountability of these. What I can say is that from the CNMV that we are, we have analyzed the recommendations. We are the destination of just one of the 32 recommendations alone, just autonomously. Most of them are jointly recommended to the Ministry of Economy and CNMV, or to the Ministry of Finance and the like, or sometimes to the exchanges, etc. But from our side, of course, we have every intention to seriously assess, the implementation of these recommendations to the maximum ability, let's say, and adapting to the circumstances. So we are receiving the report with a lot of enthusiasm and in an active manner.
Next question comes from the journalist Nuno, I think.
Hello. Yeah, almost Carmine answered my question. I'm Nuno Rodrigo from El País 5 Días. I was going to ask you if you are working with an idea of a calendar for these proposals to come into effect. So I may reformulate. Would you be happy with the timeline that Carmine has set for Italy, like in 3-4 years having the draft bill in place? And so, if you are confident that these proposals are going to take in account, not only taken into account by the government, but also going through the legislative process. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuno. I really hope we can be quicker than that. That would be my desire, of course. The good thing, apart from being public, is that the recommendations also have attached a time frame, short, medium term. So there is also a hint of which measures could be lower hanging fruit or more urgent to develop, and others medium term. But of course, that will depend a lot on the ability. Some of these measures that are proposed require changes in laws, not only in lower regulation. So is not, some of these measures are not easy pieces in terms of achieving that in a few weeks or a few months. But nevertheless, I think they're important that we see those in a conjunction, in an overall sense, as Nathalie was saying before, because it's not just, there is no single silver or copper bullet as with CMU. There's no single measure that by doing that you solve the issue. You really need to act on a number of those. That's part of the complexity. But I would be optimistic in terms of time frames in the Spanish case. I don't know the Italian.
No, but then just to say that obviously also in our case, and the report is on the website, there was a very vast menu of measures, and I would say that the end point was the law, because many things were implemented much in advance, but again there was another consultation. And then also is what the policymaker want to do. So for example, we had the issue also in the Italian report, I would say again supply and demand. Then what was then the law said, and this is the last article actually of the law, so now is compulsory, will be compulsory to have financial education at schools. And by the way, we had also discussion with the committee. This is, the report was not saying that, was also obviously underlining, like here, also the importance of having. So let's say it was is a different menu. Many were administrative things, many things were actually adopted at the very beginning by the process of the stock exchange. Obviously, it's important, all these things, that they are very well calibrated, because there are always been sometimes unintended consequences in rushing to do measures. So I think that, and then again, so having again, this is an open document, open to the market. Again, this is also coming from the interaction. That's why I think is is also reflecting many of the instances that have been already here, and then it's but I think it's important, obviously, and just to finish, Rodrigo, but also because we are here with also with Nathalie and Marcel. I mean, remember that capital markets are very much integrated. These capital market reviews are not there to fragment, local markets. Okay, now we don't talk anymore of capital markets union, but we talk about savings and investments union to underline also the importance of the two sides and the participation to markets. But we are, in the framework of having a more integrated market, and markets, the capital markets are so integrated that, liquidity can actually very, very easily not only leave a market, but leave a continent. So it's important to see it, and many of these measures are actually top-down, what is also already the EU Commission, but also at the level for us as OECD of international standards are there. Thanks.
I think there are another question from that corner.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Miguel Medina from Capital Markets. I have one question on the OECD report. Basically, I think every single speaker has mentioned the relevance of retail investor participation in the market, as if this was sort of a silver bullet that has been mentioned several times. I mean, that's something that we had in Spain, and that it has vanished for the past 10, 15 years. I do not recall a primary issue in Spain where we have had a retail tranche for the past 10, 12 years. So my question is, what have we done wrong to lose that market? And second, what are the recommendations to bring those investors back?
No, thank you. As you may have heard, I said retail, direct and indirect retail investor participation. And as numbers shows that there is not so much retail investor participation, in particular the indirect, because when an indirect is also participation through institutional investors. And you see the numbers of institutional investors, direct participation in the market, which is the indirect of the citizen investing through them, is very low. And so this is something then, okay, we can discuss the insurance, we can discuss the pension fund, the increasing obviously of long-term investors like pension fund is increasing, okay, that will increase that. Then obviously, again, you can direct investor participation should also come in an appropriate way. I mentioned the OECD corporate governance principle because they are, the obsession is make it easier access to capital markets for companies, bond and equity, but the main objective, there are three of them, is obviously investor protection. So direct investor participation should always, also happen with, that's why, an appropriate knowledge, appropriate transparency also of the instrument, and appropriate instruments for them. And diversification of portfolio, so depending also on the structure. So we are not here to say we should encourage all citizens to invest directly 100% of the savings and maybe also in one single share. So we should be careful. So I think a set of measures and how to, let's say, bring back, okay, is a set, again, there is no silver bullet also here. Indirectly, we mentioned in the report, many issues, okay, attractiveness and trust in the market, which comes from microstructure, liquidity. A set also of kind of simplicity, maybe bigger than a fiscal incentive is, for example, simplicity in tax treatment, because this is something that then also some countries we have seen, the availability of simplified accounts. The largest now stock market in terms of listed companies in Europe, number of listed companies, we know the main market is Sweden, so a country with less, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, than less than 10 million people, no? And is also the largest market cap in terms of the growth company. So because this is direct and indirect participation with a set, of measures. So again, there is a complex, then obviously including in the set is also a robust regulatory and supervisory framework, because trust is essentially market. If you have, you build, like everything in life, reputation little by little, and then you can lose it like this. So I think it's part of this participation having also a set, including an appropriate sanctioning system.
Okay, any other question? Yeah, over here.
So, Sarai Criadro from Inbonis Rating. Okay, so maybe my question is very specific because it's about one of the recommendations, which is you recommend the public sector, Bank of Spain, CNMV, and Ministry of Finance to support the issuance of rating for SMEs in order to improve the debt market. How are you planning to include the already established rating agencies that can provide these issuance into these recommendations?
Yeah, if you see the report, again, there are policy issues. So we mentioned one of the example, which is, for example, the Banque de France example, which is an initiative one, together with many other things, which is a set of measures, is in senses like going back to the retail question, to increase in an economy, which there are a lot of SMEs, in particular, yes, in particular there are not or not yet listed and not even issuing bonds. It's important to increase, the attractiveness, the interest, the coverage of research, also a set of measures, which is what one of the many things is also having a sort of, that's why I said also scoring, okay, then rating also is something even more specific and also from a regulatory point of view in particular. I think the availability, which is then the system that basically Banque de France is using, the availability that typically banks and central banks they do have coming also from banks, or a lot of data that are coming also from all the relationship that all companies that do have, or the traditional bank and the others, they can give rise. So not necessarily these are the traditional rating is a rating after an issuance, but what we think and what, for example, in some countries done is an evaluation of the company, which is again could be not even yet an issuer, okay, to that. So how now what would be the right institution? I think this again, it is for the country, I would say, to decide if he's interested or not. There are many ways, okay. Obviously, it's difficult to think that a market which is typical, not only is concentrated and also regulated at EU level with also big players, by the way, non-European, will be, let's say, interested in working with a very small company. So we think that we need to have, again, it's also supply and demand of information. If you have more information and synthetic information that may come from evaluation, maybe from independent entities, market entities or independent, including public entities, can be one of one of the thing that you can find on the menu, but again, there are many of them. Okay.
So one more question. So let's open the floor for any other issue, and we will admit question in English or Spanish on any topic, if there is some.
Jorge Zuluaga de Bloomberg. Yo voy a cambiar al español, disculpadme, para ser más preciso. Yo quería hacer dos preguntas. Una sobre Grifols. La SEC ha decidido archivar el expediente que tenía abierto contra Gotham, lo cual marca una diferencia bastante grande frente a lo que ha hecho la CNMV. Quería preguntar qué lectura hace de todo esto el presidente. Y por otro lado, un poco sobre la OPA de BVA. Saber si ya tiene claro el calendario que tiene la CNMV al respecto, si va a esperar a que concluya la fase 2 de la CNMC o prefiere adelantarse. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. Bueno, sobre el primer punto, lo que diría es que en España tenemos, y en Europa tenemos un régimen sobre abuso de mercado específico, muy distinto, sorprendentemente distinto del estadounidense en muchos de los aspectos, para que ellos conozcan bien las normas, por ejemplo, sobre insider trading. Y por tanto nosotros estamos muy, convencidos de que hay indicios de una conducta que requiere actuación, y por eso se ha remitido en el caso de Gotham las actuaciones a la Fiscalía, y creemos que es plenamente consistente con nuestro reglamento de abuso de mercado, que es el que regula en Europa estas cuestiones. Que otras jurisdicciones tengan normas distintas, ¿qué ocurre? Pues lógicamente no podemos explicarlo nosotros. Sobre lo segundo, es cierto que dijimos hace ya algunas semanas que cuando tuviéramos más visibilidad sobre si la operación en cuanto a su análisis de la parte de concentración empresarial pasaba a fase 2 o se mantenía en fase 1, y cuando tuviéramos más visibilidad de cómo estaba avanzado el folleto, pues anunciaríamos digamos cómo veíamos la cuestión del momento de la aprobación. Entonces, ahora ya existe esa visibilidad, efectivamente, en cuanto al proceso de las autoridades de competencia, y lo que hemos analizado es que, siendo esto una OPA de canje, en la cual los destinatarios de la oferta no reciben efectivo, sino que se convierten en accionistas del oferente, cosa que es muy importante en este análisis, y teniendo en cuenta que la operación ha pasado a fase 2 y teniendo en cuenta las circunstancias actuales y la previsión de cuándo temporalmente podría resolverse eso, lo que consideramos es que lo más apropiado es que la CNMV apruebe la OPA una vez que se conozcan las condiciones relativas al proceso de análisis de concentración empresarial, que son una información importante para los destinatarios de la oferta. Eso es lo que puedo decir, pero subrayando que estamos haciendo este análisis para esta operación en concreto, porque como sabemos la norma permite la aprobación en cualquier momento, no estamos renunciando a ninguno de las facultades que nos atribuye la ley, y dos, con la información que tenemos en estos momentos y las circunstancias actuales, que es algo muy importante de precisar, porque lógicamente si cambiasen las circunstancias radicalmente, pues volveríamos a analizar la cuestión.
Marcos.
Sí, Iñaki de las Heras, de La Vanguardia. Sobre esta cuestión, bueno, doy este último asunto, damos entonces por hecho que ya la CNMV ha concluido lo que es el trabajo, el análisis del folleto, ya está concluido y simplemente pues está a la espera, entiendo, de que la CNMC pues tome su decisión, ¿no? Ese matiz. Me gustaría también preguntar por una novedad también que ha comentado el señor Buenaventura, ¿no? Acerca de esta innovación sin necesidad de cambio regulatorio que va a permitir que las empresas puedan empezar a cotizar sin necesidad de plantear una OPV, ¿no? Entiendo que sería algo así como una especie de listing, como el que ha hecho recientemente Inmocemento. No sé si va en esa línea, y entiendo que de fondo lo que hay es esta preocupación pues para intentar, por la falta de éxito de las empresas a la hora de acceder a los mercados, como ha ocurrido con los casos recientemente por ejemplo, de Europastry y alguno más, por ejemplo, Astara, ¿no? Y una ultimísima cuestión, también me gustaría conocer en qué ha quedado aquella investigación a Twitter, a X, a la red social X, después de detectar casos de publicidad engañosa. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Iñaki. Bueno, sobre lo primero, un folleto de OPA no concluye en un momento determinado. Un folleto es dinámico y tiene que recoger las circunstancias que hay en cada momento, con lo cual lo que he dicho es que el folleto está muy avanzado, pero hasta que no se fija el momento en el que se eleva para aprobación, pues no puede descartarse que tengan que incorporarse nuevos elementos, circunstancias que aparezcan en el futuro, etcétera, etcétera. Con lo cual, lo que no he dicho concluido, he dicho muy avanzado. Lo segundo no, bueno, el listing no sería exactamente como el ejemplo que has mencionado de Inmocemento, porque en esa compañía existía ya una distribución entre el público. Eran acciones que ya poseían miles de inversores. Estaríamos hablando más bien de un listing previo a la distribución en el público. Un listing que sería la admisión a cotización, no tanto la cotización efectiva, porque no esperamos que esas compañías tengan una cotización, digamos, frecuente, ni muchísimo menos, pero estarían admitidas a negociación. Y lo que haríamos efectivamente, en línea con lo que preguntabas sobre otras compañías, es buscar una alternativa, un método que reduzca el riesgo de fracaso y el riesgo de ejecución en las salidas a bolsa, como algunas compañías han sufrido en el pasado, estableciendo con muchos meses, más de 6 meses de antelación, la fecha o la semana en la que pretendían salir al mercado. Es tratar de abordar ese riesgo de ejecución, invirtiendo los factores y confiando en una distribución posterior. Esa sería la idea. Y insisto, no es que estemos cambiando la forma de hacer salidas a bolsa en España, estamos abriendo una posibilidad adicional para que los emisores y sus asesores decidan si les interesa o no el explorar esa posibilidad adicional.
Twitter.
Gracias. Sobre Twitter no tengo nada que anunciar en este momento, pero como saben, en aquellos casos en los que la CNMV pues se dan ciertas circunstancias, pues cuando llega el momento oportuno, pues hacemos algún anuncio, o bien de incoación de un eventual expediente, o bien de que se han concluido las actuaciones, pero en este momento no tengo nada que anunciar.
Hola. Hola, Pablo Allende Salazar, del Periódico de Cataluña. Una precisión. He entendido por su última respuesta que lo que van a esperar es al dictamen de la CNMC sobre la fase 2 para aprobar el folleto. No, que también se podría quizás, sabiendo cuándo lo va a aprobar la CNMC, aprobar el folleto más o menos por esa fecha, y el plazo de aceptación, que es para lo que afecta al canje, abrirlo cuando llega el dictamen de la CNMC por aclarar ese esquema, y si en cualquier caso no esperarían a la que se ha dado en llamar fase 3, ¿no? Que es posibles condiciones adicionales del Gobierno. Y luego una precisión, creo que no es muy habitual que esperen a la CNMC para decidir sobre un folleto. Usted había explicado alguna vez que hay que mantener un equilibrio entre en que la rapidez, ¿no? Que los accionistas puedan decidir rápido y que tengan toda la información posible. Me gustaría saber, como parece que es algo un poco excepcional la decisión que han tomado, ¿por qué han priorizado una cosa a otra? Gracias.
Gracias. Bueno, sobre lo primero, lo que he hecho es que me he referido a la aprobación de la OPA. La aprobación de una OPA coincide con la aprobación de un folleto, es decir, en el momento en que la CNMV considera que el folleto es completo y contiene toda la información para tomar una decisión, procede a la aprobación del documento, y eso supone, digamos, el pistoletazo de salida para que la OPA pueda fijar, o el opante pueda fijar un periodo de aceptación que está tasado en la normativa. Entonces, lo que estamos diciendo es que en las circunstancias actuales, y con la información que tenemos y con la previsión temporal que se está manejando para ese tipo de procesos, consideramos que lo más apropiado es que la aprobación del folleto y, por tanto, de la OPA se produzca una vez conocidas esas condiciones. ¿De acuerdo? Ese es el matiz. Has mencionado la pregunta que no era habitual que esperásemos a la CNMC. Yo no lo querría plantear en términos de esperar o no esperar a una entidad, a una autoridad en concreto, pero lo que sí es estadísticamente muy patente es que en las últimas 24 operaciones hemos siempre autorizado después o simultáneamente a la autorización de las autoridades de competencia, con lo cual no es nada inhabitual que se produzca esa secuencia temporal. Todo lo contrario, lo habitual y la norma ha sido la otra. Y sobre lo último, bueno, lo que hemos fijado es un principio de actuación en relación a las condiciones. La mecánica en la que eso debe operar en las últimas fases o en las últimas semanas del procedimiento es algo que lógicamente tendremos que analizar cuando llegue el momento y evaluarlo con las circunstancias que en ese momento estén previstas.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Cuestión.
Hola, buenos días. Cristina Hidalgo, de ONE Economía. Volviendo sobre la OPA, quería saber si tienen calculado algún tipo de plazo, porque si tienen que esperar a la CNMC y luego estudiar qué van a decir o los remedies, no sé si esto se puede ir quizá hasta mediados de 2025. Y luego también quería preguntarle sobre las criptomonedas. Hoy se ha conocido que solo 5 bancos han pedido solicitud para poder operar el año que viene, y no sé si esperan desde la CNMV que esto tenga recorrido, que haya más bancos, o es que no hay un interés en España. Gracias.
Sí, gracias. Bueno, sobre los plazos, ahí el plazo relevante no es de evaluación nuestra, al contrario, esos son plazos muy cortos. Se trata de reflejar en un documento unas condiciones y lo que implica eso para el oferente, con lo cual la CNMV en esa situación no tiene que, digamos, evaluar la sensatez de esas condiciones o su adecuación a la norma. Eso ya lo han hecho otras autoridades. Lo único que tenemos que evaluar es si están claramente recogidas en un folleto, y eso no es una cuestión de meses, sino de días o como mucho unas semanas. Es decir, que no creo que sea un proceso que demore en absoluto el pronunciamiento de la CNMV cuando eso se produzca. Y luego sobre los proveedores de criptoactivos, Bueno, en realidad no son 5 bancos, estamos hablando de 3 entidades financieras que han solicitado, que han notificado, mejor dicho, la intención de utilizar la posibilidad del periodo transitorio que establece la norma y de prestar servicios sobre criptoactivos, y 2 nuevos participantes, 2 entidades nuevas que se darían de alta como proveedores de criptoactivos. Bueno, todavía falta tiempo, quiero decir que nosotros hemos hecho un esfuerzo y hemos sido muy proactivos para que el sector pueda tener contacto con los equipos de la CNMV, hemos sacado una guía, hemos hecho un cuestionario, hemos tenido reuniones con el sector porque no queremos esperar al último momento, pero es cierto que cualquier proveedor de criptoactivos puede decidir enviar la solicitud en enero, en febrero o a mediados del año que viene, si lo desea, con lo cual es pronto para ver, digamos, cuál va a ser la demanda real, y de momento estamos procesando todas las solicitudes que hemos recibido pues con absoluta normalidad y sin ningún tipo de atasco, por supuesto.
Okay, last chance. One more question. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll do this one. I think it's for Carmine. I think he mentioned he was formerly a Consop commissioner. I was looking, it caught my eye. You look at Euronext, the activity in the junior market, and Italy is doing very, very well. I mean, you can see like small caps and really small caps, market caps between, 10, 20, 30 million euros, raising a small amount of money. So I think it's a huge success. What is the trigger? What is the reason behind that outperformance by Italy in Euronext?
Yeah, this is thank you for the questions. Very interesting. And again, I would say that the starting point, in a sense, was and the analysis also was similar to here. So basically, we hadn't had for many years, and I was also working before for an issuers association. Basically listings, basically 0 net listings on the regulated market. Okay, I think having appropriate and proportional, flexibility and proportionality, which is also the mantra at the OECD, appropriate set of rules and supervision. So for growth markets, so for the MTF, okay. And I would say the MTF run by the exchange, I call them the listing MTFs in a sense, it's not technically the right word. Also combined with, these are, again, we have a lot of SMEs, so if you see those that went on the market, with some exceptions, that they were really truly, small and medium companies. It's combined also, okay, we can discuss in another conference or meeting some, for example, the introduction, the EU decided in 2014, from 2016 it was applied the new market abuse regulation that Rodrigo mentioned before. I flag you that that regulation, right or wrong, introduced the same disclosure obligations also for MTFs. So basically, with respect to the past, proportional regulation in terms of prospectuses. So if you go there without a public offer on the MTF, you don't have a prospectus. If you have a set, of investors there, but in any case, having stringent requirements in terms of price-sensitive information. So this was quite attractive. They entered the market. In some cases, we also had now, it seems, history talking about SPACs, but this was a market with very small number of companies. We had 35 SPACs in Italy. All there, 35 is 20% or 30% of what was the market before, I would say, this growth. So this has been a good recipe. But I tell you, I think also this education part has been quite relevant. So many of these companies, they were coming from these public-private project. This was run by the exchange with the finance ministry, also the market forces. This was so, many of them, I would say quite all of them were coming from this program, but the program was for hundreds of companies then, but having then, and then, is a network effect. Liquidity attracts liquidity, listing attracts listing. So we have had, I think, has been good success. Also, on the primary market, because the secondary market is accessible by retail, the primary, when it was done without the prospectus, but typically this was the reason why then companies went on the MTF, okay? Then there were, I would say, also growing awareness, also applying MiFID II of these, I would say, intermediate class of professional investors on demand, but also some of them. So there was I would say, again, there is not I cannot give you one, but a set of measures, of incentives, supply, demand, knowledge of the market that made these, I would say, a reasonable success. And today it has more companies than the regulated market. And in some cases, but I close here, because this is related to one of the measures of the paper, maybe, and there was not a rigid threshold so that when you go over a certain market cap, you have to change. Because, then thresholds are always wrong as an economist. I mean, because then you never know how to adjust. You are epsilon below or epsilon above. So this was, I have to say now, if you see market cap of some of them, I would say they are companies that could be ready. Some of them went then on the main market, okay, the regulated market. Some of them are there. By the way, in the law, there is also a simplification of the process to go from one to the other, again, abiding by the rules. So, a set of things, but I think this is, now a very important, and this was accompanied by the mini bond market, which is a segment, is an MTF. This is only for professional investors, even the secondary, okay. But I think it's quite interesting and has been a great success for the colleagues of the exchange.
Well, I think we close now. Let me thank Nathalie, Marcel, Carmine, of course, Paula, please, Anna, pass our thanks to the Ministry for the cooperation and the collaboration on the project, and thank you everybody for coming here. And it's been quite a ride, this project, and in general this period. And we have the opportunity to have a chat, sharing an aperitif through that door. And continue the dialogue in an off the record fashion. So thank you very much for coming, and see you soon. Thank you.